Council Chambers, and we have Councilmember Perry and Councilmember Parks and myself, one more member, and we'll have a quorum. But let's go ahead and begin our meeting. And very good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good morning. Jim Clark, Director of Federal Relations in the Mayor's Office. My report's fairly brief this morning. I did want to mention the fact that we've learned that the Department of Transportation, City Department of Transportation, received $8 million in formula grant funds for the purchase of 16 over-the-road commuter express buses. These are, and they will be CNG buses. These are buses that have a capacity of 53 to 57 passengers. We found out that they had received this through a grant program called the Urban Area Capital Transit Program that provided money directly from the Federal Transit Administration to cities and transit agencies. And we'll be able to have, if you'd like, we can schedule a representative from DOT to come to the next meeting and be able to describe this. They have put together a one-page summary on this.
Sure, let's go ahead and do that. And do you know if these are replacing existing buses?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, they'll be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
The other thing is, as you know, when we started this process with our system in the city was a decentralized grants management system, whereby each department would sort of took the responsibility. There was a coordinating role that the CAO's office did, but it was really on the responsibility of the departments. And because of all of the work that we're having to do with the ARA funds, we found it necessary to go to a more centralized system, which we hope we can incorporate in the future. And so as we're going along, we're looking at best practices that we can put in place that would eventually lead us to some place where we can have a good centralized grants management system in the city. Mm-hmm. And one of the areas where we found that we've had a little bit of some glitches is in the area of the acceptance of awards and the procedure about from the time in which we find out about an award until we get it to you before here, the ad hoc committee, and then later on to the City Council. And so working with the CAO's office, and particularly the consultants that we have from Blue Crane, Steve Bonham and Alan Mills, we're working on putting together a procedure to help identify where the problems are with the award acceptance and making sure we can do things to expedite it, but also to do this in a way such that at the end of this whole process, when we convert to a centralized grants management system, we can have something in place that will work well. So we hope to be able to come back to you in a couple of weeks with that as well.
Can you describe a little bit more what the problem has been? Are you talking about a timing problem? You're talking about, that we are finding out but not alerting the legislative process? Or?
Yeah, sometimes the departments hear about an award and then proceed to go on their way about it without, initiating the process.
So have we been accepting any awards without going through formal approval?
We're going through the formal approval process, but I mean it's been slowed down because we have to first identify that they received an award and then start doing it. There's been some discussion that we need to try to get clarification on with respect to the proprietary departments. They've, in the past, generally on their grants, all it requires is their board to have approval, but one of the things that I think when we set this process up with having the ad hoc committee and your agreeing to have this expedited process at the front end so that we could apply on time was the idea that you would have an opportunity to review these when they come back in. So that's one of the things that we need to clarify as well, too, with the proprietaries to make sure that that goes through the process. And then just the amount of, for a lot of these departments, they've never really had grants before, so the kinds of information that they need to provide to the CAO's office to initiate the whole process has been sort of a back and forth that's added extra time to it.
Okay.
And I don't know, Bill may want to add something to that, but that's
fine. All right. Anything else you'd like to add, Bill, in general, or anything else?
Just we're waiting on, so we still have some big awards out there. The Tiger grants for the $1.5 billion, still waiting to hear on that. We haven't heard on neighborhood stabilization. We have $100 million on that. We've been told probably by the end of the year to hear about our smart grid investment or demonstration projects, which we had about $151 million outstanding there. So we still have...
There's some that's outstanding beyond the $30 billion that the President announced.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to schedule for a future date, colleagues, a committee hearing it begins to do some forensic work on grants that we haven't received to get a better sense of why and to do what we can to fix that system. I've been approached with some sort of anecdotal evidence of which departments have fallen short, misspelling recovery on applications on the front sheet, people who came forward. Obviously, there are some times when there's formulas and other things that are working against us and we can't do any better. There are other things that are out there that, for the committee, it's difficult to tell because we kind of hear bad news and we say, oh, Washington must have, screwed us over again, and yet sometimes we're doing it to ourselves. And I want us to find some of those best cases, maybe work with the mayor's office, controller's office to do some kind of forensic auditing on that to see what is missing in the process. But certainly a couple, included the smart grid application, the first round at least, the electric vehicle grant monies and some port truck monies as well. That we're just, I had 3 or 4 folks that are very well informed and working with municipalities around the country, and they said, look, LA, so as policymakers really dropped the ball. And, you never know what people's motivations or where they're coming from, but I think this council committee, part of it is to do that sort of review and to find that out. So I want to do that in a very open and transparent process, but I think the people of Los Angeles deserve to know when we've done a good job and when we have proprietaries or others that have really dropped the ball, at least in comparison to some of our peers around the region. Okay. Any questions on the general stuff? Yes, Mr. Rosenthal?
I'm curious. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. It's $412 million we've received, $228, and...
Will you take the microphone down just a little bit so folks can hear you? Will you move the microphone down a little? Thanks.
What's your total that we've been awarded so far?
Excuse me, Bill Craig with the CAO's office, $412 million, approximately.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. Do we have any idea how many jobs that might translate into?
We've looked at that. I don't have it with me today, but I can certainly get back to you. I can get back to you as early as this afternoon.
Okay, do you have any sense of what it might be? Just, I know you'll get back to us, but for the public to know that this money has been stimulus money, has created jobs, and is a good thing, considering unemployment's 10.2% today.
I can go through our dashboard here. Just 1 second, if you could, please.
I know it's like optics in the dashboard. The dashboard. Yeah, but you could do it. Well, just because of the dashboard, like in a car. I think it's using that word to...
Excuse me, Mr. Rosendahl, for that. We actually don't have the information on what the jobs are created immediately at hand. We have the estimated job numbers, but I'd have to go back to the office and look at the OMB report summaries.
Okay, so what was the estimate at this point?
On the estimated jobs, it's right here. It's a dashboard. Excuse me. Jobs by Sorry. It's not this one, it's the other one. Oh, just a second, excuse me.
One of the issues is, obviously, is as you get the money, you start...
Sure, of course.
Bringing people on.
The estimate, which would be the
eventually, at the end of the project, how many jobs?
Which is obviously important, and how many it has maybe created, what sense of a time frame it might happen, what might be at-risk young kids, all the various mixes of what the jobs could be, hopefully will be, with some estimate of it.
I have that information for you. I apologize.
Okay.
So far, the estimated number of jobs to be created from the projects that have been awarded is 7,073 jobs.
Okay, very good. Okay. And I look forward to the next report about some of the breakdown and time frame of when other jobs will.
We will be glad to prepare that for you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other general questions before we go to number 2? Okay. Let's go ahead and take up number 2. We do have 2 public speaker cards. Would you both like to be heard before or after the presentation? Would you like to go first, or would you like to hear the presentation first? Okay. Let's go ahead then and hear the presentation on item 2 then first. We can ask the department to come up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, committee and council members. My name is Romel Pasquale. I'm the acting deputy mayor for Energy and Environment, and we're here today to walk you through and to look at the recommended funding allocations for our energy efficiency and conservation block grant allocations, which is our formula money of approximately $37 million. Let me first say a few words in terms of the work that the Environmental Affairs Department had done in conjunction with a number of council offices, particularly Councilmember Perry's office and Councilmember Garcetti's office, in their leadership role in working with the communities in our extensive community process, as well as working with our energy work group in crafting what we are looking to be a very comprehensive allocation of our resources around this grant. I'm joined here with Beth Gines, who's the Assistant General Manager for the Environmental Affairs Department, along with Gretchen Hardison, who's the Director of Climate Change, and Craig Tranby, who is leading the efforts in crafting the funding allocations for submission for the Department of Energy. I'd like to turn it over to Beth to walk you through the allocations, and then we'll be open for your questions.
Great. Thank you.
Good morning, council members. Beth Gines, Assistant General Manager of Environment LA. As Deputy Mayor Pasquale noted, this morning we're here to describe the recommended categories for funding under the city's Energy Efficient and Conservation Block Grant Program. We've been before this committee a few times to describe and receive guidance on the development of a program for use of this important stimulus funding. We have discussed the initial application for $250,000 to solicit public input and ideas for expenditure of these funds and to prepare this expenditure plan. 3 weeks ago, we presented this committee with a summary of the results of the public input process and received authority to accept the initial $250,000 allocation. Today, I would like to give a brief recap of the elements that fed into the development of this recommendation and to review the primary funding categories. And then we'd be happy to address any questions or comments that you may have. As you know, the city is entitled to more than $37 million in direct allocation under the ECBG. Subtracting the initial $250,000, we have provided recommendations to program the remaining $36.7 million. In developing these recommendations, we reviewed the Federal Department of Energy list of eligible activities, which are summarized on page 3 of your report, the City Council guiding principles, which are also on page 3, the Department of Energy desired outcomes for this funding, which are on the top of page 4. We listened to and received a lot of great ideas through our public input process, and also we received program ideas and recommendations from city departments and offices. In order to meet the Department of Energy and Council objectives for longevity of programs and the ability to build systems and capacity for a range of energy efficiency projects, we have recommended placing funds in several program areas rather than funding specific projects. These programs will allow the city to establish a structure or mechanism to fund various types of projects, which will enable the city to leverage existing funding, attract future funding, and ensure that these programs continue well beyond the term of this grant. We've identified 5 program areas that encompass 14 more specific program categories. The program areas are energy efficiency retrofit programs. Now, these are the physical retrofit programs that will result in energy and greenhouse gas reductions, as well as the complementary workforce coordination. There are energy efficiency incentive programs, and these are setting up new incentive programs to reward those private entities that take the initiative to invest in energy reductions. There are private financing programs. These are programs that are designed to allow private entities, including single-family residential owners, multifamily affordable residential, and commercial property owners, to access low-cost financing for energy efficiency improvements through revolving loan funds and or an AB 811 type financing that's guaranteed by property tax assessments. Another category are the research and technology and emerging strategies programs. This collection of programs will advance the science of energy efficiency and will help the city apply this knowledge and information to a number of different issues. Community outreach and accountability is the final program area. These remaining elements of the expenditure plan will provide funding to and assistance in promoting opportunities for community members and businesses to participate in energy efficiency programs, to foster behavior changes as needed for our communities to become more sustainable, and to ensure accountability and transparency in how the city is extending these funds. Deputy Mayor Pasquale will present you with the recommended allocations.
I'm making some amendments.
Thank you, Beth. What you have in front of you is also a graph, a pie chart, essentially laying out the allocation in terms of its totality. We further refined it to really examine where our funding is going. And based on the conversations that we've had with the community folks, and certainly within the departments and throughout the city, it's clear that we need to put the money both within our municipal operations but also outside of the municipal operations. One of the criticisms and comments that we received time and time again was our residents are not seeing the money. If you look at the totality of the $37 million, approximately half, it was pretty much split 50-50, those that are going to be used in municipal operations and those that will go out to communities, whether or not it's access of nonprofit grants for outreach or residential retrofit, commercial retrofit, but it is going out to the communities. So this further breaks down and really emphasizes the fact that these resources are going to our residents and businesses. Thank you.
Okay, great. Anything else?
No, but we'd be happy to answer questions. And we also have representatives here from the Department of General Services, Housing Department, the Community Redevelopment Agency, the Department of Water and Power, and the Community Development Department to also answer questions.
Okay, great. Let me make 3 amendments, and then we'll hear the cards and any additional comments or questions. On item number 7, the $3.4 million for multifamily affordable residential, let's add that include rent stabilization units. Those words. So you add that include rent stabilization units into the description to read affordable housing projects that include rent stabilization units. Also on item 7, a second amendment is to instruct Environmental Affairs Department to apply for all available grants for multifamily housing, including the California State Energy Program, SEP, and all other applicable grant programs to maximize funding for this program. And then third, on item 13, if we can add research to the item 13 title to read Community Outreach, Research, and Public Education Grant Program, allocation $1.5 million. Yeah, okay. Let me just take the 2 public speaker cards real quick, and then we will go through our questions. Lucinda Sterrett, and then we have Sarah Shaw.
Good morning, council members.
Good morning.
I'm Cindy Sterrett from Latham & Watkins, and we represent Aimco Venezia, which is the owner of the Lincoln Place project. With the leadership of Councilmember Rosendahl, a settlement agreement has been signed with the tenants. We're getting very close to completing our settlement agreement with the city. That will allow rehab to proceed for 696 units, most of which have not received any energy efficiency or water conservation upgrades for about 50 years. So it's a tremendous opportunity. Councilmember Rosendahl has pointed out the sustainability opportunities. We've submitted an application to the task force. We've been working hard with DWP, but the staff report recommended allocations we don't believe would allow our project to be considered for funding. We think that the fact that it's a competitive process is a terrific thing, and that there should be an opportunity for multifamily housing projects like this one to be considered in that competition, because we think we'll be able to demonstrate tremendous efficiencies. Very much appreciate the amendments Mr. Garcetti suggested, and I just want to make sure I understand that the staff recommendation was that the multifamily could only be to projects that the city had already funded or was going to fund through other city funding through their affordable housing program. We're asking that all RSO properties should be eligible, even if the city has not funded them through the affordable housing NOFA. We also think it would be very appropriate for a larger proportion of the total $37 million to be eligible for multifamily housing projects. The President and the DOE have made very clear that there are tremendous opportunities there, so we'd like to ask, could the category be doubled there? With DWP, there's a recommendation in number 5, and our only question on that was just to clarify that that does intend to allow multifamily energy retrofits to also apply through DWP. It wasn't clear in the language to us that that was the intention. On the RSO, members of this committee have been very, very involved in the importance of that housing stock that 600,000 plus units around the city and reinvestment in that housing stock. So we ask you to consider that, and once again, it'll give us a tremendous opportunity. We'll create 600 to 800 prevailing wage green jobs to restore these units, and we'll be investing over $100 million in that reinvestment, and that such changes would make that possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Sarah Shaw is our next speaker.
Good morning, council members. My name is Sarah Shaw. I work for JMB Realty in Century City, and I'm here today to represent the Century City Transportation Management Organization. I'm a founding member of the board of that organization. Lisa Trifoletti from Councilman Koretz's office would be here with us today, but I believe she's having a baby right now, so we wish her the best. So the Century City TMO is a nonprofit organization made up of Century City businesses and employers, and the TMO will offer innovative transportation solutions to the 44,000 employees who commute to Century City each day from all over LA County. With 87% of Century City employees commuting to the area alone in their cars each day, an incentives-based organization that encourages commuters to carpool, bicycle, or take a van pool will work a long way toward helping to reduce traffic in the region. Transportation experts agree that TMO is the single most effective way to reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. If we are able, from a funding standpoint, to implement all of the proposed TMO projects, we will eliminate approximately 3,000 total vehicle trips and from Century City each day. This represents a 1% reduction per year in total daily trips to and from Century City over 4 years. While private businesses are fronting much of the costs and will provide ongoing financial support, we cannot implement all of the TMO's important programs alone, which brings me why I am here today. The staff is recommending that of the more than $37 million in funding provided under the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, none of it, I repeat, none of it is earmarked for general transportation-related programs and to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and conserve energy. Our project was presented to staff. Notably, this is true even though DOE identified 13 broad categories of eligible activities for the ARRA grants that included, among other things, categories for development and implementation of transportation programs and the reduction of, and capture of methane and greenhouse gases. So on behalf of the board, I'd like to request that you expand the programs currently proposed by the Environmental Affairs Department in its energy efficiency and conservation strategy to include innovative transportation programs that conserve energy and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Environmental Affairs Department's current list of proposed programs focuses heavily on retrofitting existing buildings to make them more energy efficient at the expense of other sectors, including in particular transportation. Using at least a portion of the DOE funds for alternative strategies to reduce Angelenos' reliance on their automobiles makes great practical sense while also fulfilling the goals of the grant program. The Century City TMO would like to have at least the opportunity to apply for some of the ARRA funds for the purchase of alternative fuel and or low-emission vehicles, including electric bicycles, scooters, and automobiles for the use of car and van poolers who need a mode of local transport during their work days. Additionally, we would like to have the opportunity to apply for ARRA funds to develop a real-time traffic software program that provides up-to-the-minute traffic information on local streets. Such a program would encourage commuters.
If I can ask you to conclude a little bit. We have 2 minutes per speaker. We've gone about a minute over that.
Okay.
But if I can ask you to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay. I'd just like to be considered so that we might possibly be able to get some of these funds.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry to cut you off. Okay. A couple other things that I want to go over, and then Ms. Perry, and then we'll go from there. One of the things that the mayor and I spoke with Secretary Chu about in Washington was white roofs, and he really, it's one of his priorities and I know we're working on this in the working group that gave us our green building ordinance, but is there room for any white roofs work both in the retrofits of our own buildings and also into private buildings as well?
Yes. In the retrofit program, number 1, white roofs are part of the overall types of eligible projects for retrofit. We also have a tremendous opportunity to do a white roof program with the competitive $400 million block grant that will be coming up shortly.
And just to be clear for everybody, that's a separate, this is a formula allocation, and there's nationwide $400 million that is for competitive grant.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking at white roofs not just in the context of municipal operations, because if you look at our municipal buildings, we have a tremendous amount, over close to 2.4, I believe, million square feet of white roofs that exist already. We just don't see it because they're under either shingles or obviously we can't see it. But Los Angeles is a leader in white roofs. So what we wanted to do is one of the ideas is expand it out to just not being for municipal operations.
Mm-hmm.
But
okay. Who's going to be developing the RFP? Do you want to add something to that? Go ahead. Please.
Under number 5, the enhanced utility incentives, cool roofs is called out in particular.
Gotcha.
As a new rebate program that EWP would be hosting.
Great.
That's the private side. And as to the public speaker comment, that would apply to multifamily as well.
Okay. All right. And who's going to be developing the RFPs for each of these categories of funding?
Gretchen Hardison, Environmental Affairs. You may notice that we have identified a lead department for each of these program funding categories, and
so they'll take the lead on the RFPs.
They will take the lead on the RFPs together with our working group, interdepartmental.
Okay. And one of the things that I think a number of us on the council, I know Mr. Rosendahl working with a couple of things in Mar Vista area. We're doing this in Silver Lake. Mr. Alarcon is doing it in Pacoima. We're looking at doing kind of strategic demonstration green neighborhoods as well. There's a lead category now for getting LEED certified for an entire neighborhood, which is kind of an evolving standard, but nevertheless a good impulse. And I think through an area like Elysian Valley in my own district, where we've done the first green streets, we're right next to the LA River, we do all of our composting there, we have new community gardens, we have a bike path about to open, where we can put these things together to show a real narrative of a green community is something that I'd like us to consider. It's great to have all these specifics called out, and we need to separate first, but then we need to come back to unifying together so that people can see if we spread it so thin, besides folks who work in municipal buildings, so I think we'll see a big bang in here. A lot of people won't see that out there, and they'll wonder, what did this block grant do to kind of change communities? And I think the White House in particular is looking to highlight that in my conversations with folks at HUD, Department of Energy, and the White House Office of Urban Affairs. The idea of sustainable communities is really what they're talking about these days. And I know we're looking to work closely with the mayor's office and council offices with that new White House office on urban affairs. Mercedes Marquez, who's our assistant secretary now at HUD, we really have an opportunity, I think, to tell that narrative and to try to find some different places in the city. So whatever we can do to keep an eye on that, to stitch some of these pieces together, and we're communities that are very aggressive, like in Mr. Rosendahl's district, or council members who want to be aggressive about that. I would like to instruct the Environmental Affairs Department to kind of give some additional not formal points, but some additional thought to that, where we can stitch those pieces together, because I think that'll knit a very nice narrative for us here and just make a larger, lasting impact than siloed programs. Ms. Perry.
Okay, great. Thank you. I wanted to ask a couple of points for clarification. On recommendation number 1, I'm just doing some rough numbers here. 16 million applied to about 1,100 municipal buildings would account for about $14,000 per building. And I wanted to know if we're looking at a definition of municipal buildings, and what types of buildings are we talking about? Are we talking about rec and parks facilities, libraries, a city hall? And then are we also making this a city-wide program?
The 1,100 includes the general services, rec and parks, and convention center. We're also, in a data sort of tracking sense, talking to the proprietaries about that. It does not technically include the proprietaries at this point in time. In terms of citywide, are you referring to beyond the Civic Center, or in terms of
city facilities throughout the city?
Yes.
That includes?
Includes throughout the city, every council district. I don't know if we have general services here. They could probably provide a little more detail on that.
Can I hear?
Sid, you mind?
Just the gentleman from General Services? Yeah, my concern is that $14,000 is not a lot of money per building, and I'm just trying to get a sense of where you'd be going in terms of coverage on 1,100 buildings. So,
Yes, my name is Sid Salpo from General Services, and it does include all citywide buildings, and mainly we're concentrating on buildings such as libraries that are very visible, or some of the rec and park facilities that would be more visible to the communities. And it's really not $14,000 per building. That's not where it's going to fall, because we're going to categorize building on what the needs are. We're creating a portfolio manager in the Department of Energy's website, and based on the energy score, the intensity scores, we'll know what buildings actually need the most amount of work. And then we're also looking at areas that actually have the highest unemployment, that actually we're able to hire in those areas also. And there are certain criteria we've set, and according to those criteria, then we'll find out which buildings to pick or select. And then closer, because we are still trying to meet our goal of LEED EV. That's something we're trying to approach. And for the amount of money that we have, the funding that's available, we'll see the most amount of benefit that we can get from the buildings. That's what we're looking at.
okay, and you're planning on bringing, once you've done your sorting out on your prioritization, you'll come back to committee and review that with us?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. My next question is how LED street lights got thrown into this mix. I mean, I think it's a good idea, but I want to know how that works also, and if we're looking to move funds from one pot to another based on performance. And I'm concerned, given the time restraints we have on competing for this money, whether or not we have that kind of flexibility.
Hello, Craig Trinity, Environmental Affairs again. Streetlights have been viewed as a very high impact in terms of energy efficiency benefits immediately, so we wanted to include that under GSD's purview in the sense of the block grant for simplicity's sake for the application. Those will be emphasized as part of this kind of systematic process, and we will come back with a further report on that. But there's a lot, there's a lot of opportunities around streetlights right now, the LED lights, and GSD is already testing some in their own facilities, so we're looking at kind of accelerating the implementation outside in the communities.
On recommendations 2, 3, and 4, those are the Green Workforce Program, Foreclosed Properties Retrofit Program, and then the Energy Efficiency Retrofits for Nonprofit Organizations. I wanted to know if there is a strategy in place to create linkage for these 3 programs. So basically, if we develop this program, how do we link it to the workforce to retrofit, to give people opportunity to flow through the work to be done by the non-profit organization? And have you already devised a strategy, and is that on the record as part of the document?
The question is there a strategy in place? The answer is no. Is there a strategy to be developed as part of the linkages? The answer is yes, specifically in number 2, because we're looking at workforce development as a totality, not just for municipal operations. We will use the training centers to begin to do the training out in the community, so that those opportunities for bricks and mortar projects, which are the number 3 and 4 types of projects, which are essentially bringing in those materials to then do the retrofit, we will have a trained workforce. So the linkage is that the number 2, Green Workforce Development, will create the workforce. 2 and 3 will then be the places where they will be employed. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sines, who could better speak to this.
Good morning. As I presented last time, we are looking at all of the grants that we've been aggressively going after on the federal level and at the state level to have one comprehensive program that ties into all of our good work that we've been doing over the years that involve the community college, our partners with organized labor, our partners with our community-based workforce development centers, as well as our one-source centers. This additional dollars actually fits real nicely. We have an RFP that will be coming to you through within the next couple of weeks. One of the community-based organizations, in particular in South Los Angeles, is focusing on low-income workers to be trained for a green workforce development core will fit very nicely with this particular dollars. We probably could have this on the street and actually up and running by the 1st of January. So we are very coordinated in terms of our workforce development strategy. Adding and connecting to these dollars, it will be very easy for us.
Okay, and then the last recommendation I wanted to comment on was on number 8. I was concerned because, this program, I believe, is intended to be citywide, and yet we're looking at using this Community Redevelopment Agency as the lead agency for this. And as you know, not every council district has a redevelopment area, so then there is no way to be able to flow through into an area where there's no redevelopment district set up. So, is there somebody who's coming to the table on that? Why was CRA chosen over CDD?
My name is Sandy Padilla, and I'm from CRA. And to answer your first question, as to why this program would be citywide, so if a building owner wants to retrofit their commercial building, they do not necessarily have to be located in a redevelopment area. It's just it would be housed. The program and setting up an administration would be housed within CRA.
Well, I don't. That logic still escapes me because you have a redevelopment agency to administer within the redevelopment areas, and I'm still not clear as to why the redevelopment agency was chosen over the community development department, which doesn't operate with the same, limitations. Is there some reason why the community development department can't be the lead agency instead of the CRA?
I can't answer that question right now.
Is there anybody who can answer that question?
I think we will look into it. I think the points are quite valid. One of the rationales when we're looking at where do we put this is that because there's a limited amount of money and the ability to ramp up quickly around looking at a tax lien model, the financing capacity around this existed within the CRA in terms of the folks who are looking at tax lien models around AB 811, and we're looking to apply that to the commercial sector. So the initial discussions were CRA has the capacity. However, I think we can explore the...
I would recommend that you look at CDD, because I want this to be a competitive program on a citywide basis. I really want projects to be able to meet the federal criteria in terms of readiness that fit design and flexibility to move resources into areas that are better performing than others. And, if we do this on a citywide basis, again, I have to emphasize, and I'm one who probably has more redevelopment areas than anybody else, but not everybody has one, and yet there are still needs. And the reasons that people don't necessarily have a redevelopment area are not always logical. It's just some communities just didn't want them, but it doesn't mean that the need is not there. And so, again, I'm having there's a break in terms of your logic as to why redevelopment agency was chosen over this community development department. I still don't get that, and I'd like to see that adjusted so that CDD is the lead agency on it.
So, Ms. Perry, we will work with CRA and go into the discussions. We have not had any sit-down discussions.
So this is not formalized?
No. To my perspective, no. CDD has not been involved in it, but we would more than love to be in the conversation. I do think in terms of the infrastructure that CRA is probably better suited on the...
Well, I'd like to talk to the CLA about that, because I'm not convinced of that based on what I've heard this morning, and I want to dig a little deeper on that. And so I'll ask the CLA to dig deeper on that with you, perhaps CDD and CRA, and find out what the issue is and what is unique and specific to CRA that it can't be replicated or executed over at CDD. So on that issue, I just would register my disagreement with the choice and see what other options are available.
Okay, and we've been working closely with the Clinton Climate Initiative, and we're more than happy to sit down with CDD and talk about and share the knowledge.
Yeah, and again, my point is that not everybody has a redevelopment area, and therefore the inapplicability of necessarily using an agency whose jurisdiction is derived from where they have established redevelopment areas may put us at cross purposes.
Right, and that's why we listed us as, it's listed as tentative, and we wanted to...
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the fact that you listed it as tentative, and I realize we're having a discussion about it, and that's why I wanted to register my disagreement today and to see what we can do to make those adjustments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it on this issue, Mr. Rosenthal? Okay. And Mr. Parks, I saw first, and then Mr. Rosenthal? And then, so, Ms. Hahn. So.
I just want to get some clarity. On the $36 million, then our expectation is the $250,000 will be the outreach, and then each department that is finalized as a lead will begin to put paperwork out to the community to apply.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Then my only other question is that when we look at the pie chart, there is money for looking at nonprofits, and I think it's like $100,000, I think, capped. One of the pieces of the puzzle that I don't see is whether, I think we have tens of millions of dollars worth of city property that are in the hands of nonprofits. Does that fit into the public building facilities issue, or does that require them to make a grant request?
I think this is where when we develop the program, we'll have to hit those details. The initial thinking was twofold. One was those nonprofits who own the buildings, and then those nonprofits who have long-term leases, so that there is a benefit over time, so it's a long-term lease. We did hear about what about those buildings that are occupied by nonprofits. I think we're still in the development of how we will approach that particular piece.
So
it can fit in either one, but...
Well, I think what I'm concerned about is that these, quote, city facilities, even though they're in the hands of nonprofits, at some point in time could come back in the city's hands, and to put them in a category to compete for, what, $2 million with all of the other nonprofits that have their own buildings, pretty much, I think, is sending the message that they're not going to be competitive. And if we ignore them in the public building and facilities area, I don't see what category they'd fit in.
Okay. We'll make that more clear when we develop the solicitation criteria.
Okay. And then let me just ask one other housekeeping issue. A lot of people follow these issues, and is all the material that we discuss in these meetings, are they all under the same CF number so that we can use that as a reference? Like such as the committee report we have today on November that deals with the $36 million, is all of that material under one CF number so that the public asks us, we can just reference it? Is that how is?
I think the city clerk maybe will help us out.
John White, city clerk. Good morning. Any reports we get on this matter will be on this council file. And in fact, we're trying to compile most of the ARA grants in a series of sub-files from the original file of 090648.
Then what I need, just one clarity, if we reference to the public where to follow and monitor what's going on, it is better for them to go through the web page to capture it, or to the CF number?
The web page, I think, has a broader amount of information on, like, the headlight information as a CAO and grants applied for and received. That many of the grant applications have had in committee have been verbal reports, and those aren't compiled yet in a written fashion in any of our council files. So for now, I would suggest they follow the ARA website.
Okay. Thank you.
There's also the environmentla.org website, and we have a section there where we've been providing updates on this process.
Okay.
Great. Mr. Rosenthal.
First of all, I appreciate your comment about Mar Vista and my district and how it's taken a deep interest in being in the climate change forefront. I'd like to talk about number 5 and then number 7 again. Could I get a little bit more fleshed out discussion, whoever put number 5 up there? explaining how this works, because I will be candid and tell you that I would like very much to see it expanded to ensure projects like Lincoln Place, especially Lincoln Place in my context, which is at the verge of a settlement, at the verge of creating jobs, at the verge of preserving affordable housing, and so on. And this is a very critical moment for Lincoln Place, and I'd like to understand how 5 could be expanded to cover the SRO concept and the energy efficiency concepts of Lincoln Place.
Number 5 is enhanced utility incentives?
Correct.
Correct, okay. So on that one, Lincoln Place would be included in the rebates that are being suggested as it stands today. We can make that crystal clear in the language. Part of number 5 is also an evaluation component, so we're trying to develop these new strategies, and there will be some, process to that to establish the criteria, the best practices, all of those things. So, but as it stands, it's included.
It will include. Well, I look forward to more discussion on that, because obviously not only would be the greening effort, but it would also be the affordable housing, it would also be the jobs, and also enhance the community. And then I'd like to ask a similar type question on item number 7. As you can see, I'm partial, again, to Lincoln Place on that, and I'd like us to squeeze out, and as you know, you had a wonderful meeting in my district about these monies, and I'd like to see that a multifamily affordable would have enough funds in it that would also affect me in Lincoln Place. In other words, could we kind of even get toward doubling that amount of money? How do we move in a direction of increasing multifamily affordable residence funds?
Tim, I can start. Just in a general sense, there are a lot of other multifamily funding opportunities out there. We talked about the state energy program, potentially the county's 8811 process that's underway, the federal competitive block grant process. So those are a few. There's also weatherization money and a few other things that are kind of floating around out there. Just to kind of give you that picture, I'll let Tim Elliott from Housing elaborate a little more on their proposal.
Very good.
Hi, I'm Tim Elliott.
Good morning, Tim.
The program that we had put forth was envisioned to green existing affordable housing developments. There's several of the projects that are in our portfolio have aging systems that cause the operating expenses to skyrocket, and those in an existing affordable building, those costs can't be passed on to the tenants because the rents can't be increased like they can under RSO. So this was an adjunct to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. But given sufficient resources, we could expand this to include the kinds of buildings like Lincoln Place or other RSO buildings that need the same kind of retrofit. This was it wasn't envisioned as a citywide program for all RSO buildings. We would only be able to tackle say a dozen or so large projects. But certainly the trust fund is set up to make loans for affordable housing, and we could certainly accommodate an expanded role like this.
Okay, and I'd like more detail on that offline on it, because frankly, we're at a very critical point, and I can envision those 700 units going through the entire greening process and preserving in my district affordable housing, which is one of the most challenging situations for me. And obviously, it's good for the economy, it's good for everything else. So if you could help us figure out how we can fit in, and of course, whatever we can do to see that there's sufficient funds to do 12 projects throughout the city, that would also include, obviously, Lincoln Place, from my perspective.
If I can jump in, Mr. Rosendahl, as well. Do we have any funds that are still left in the DWP funding for green building, for affordable housing? And one of the things we could do, if that's not been spent out, because I know it was slow going for a while, is either get DWP to replenish that, or if not, we could also change the language if it was only supposed to be for new construction to look at retrofitting as well. But do you know if there's any balance in that?
Yes, there's about, we have a supportive housing program and a regular affordable housing program. There's about $7 million between the two. But we've been limited by our MOU to $200,000 per project. And this was seen as a...
That's MOU with DWP?
Yes. And this was seen as a way of expanding that, because greening a large building could cost way more than $200,000.
Right.
So
Well, maybe we can look
between
at
the
some
combination of all
legislative
those...
fix there, yeah.
Yes, I think we could do that.
That would be great, and I would look forward to that. Did you want to comment, too?
I just wanted to know, excuse me, Gretchen Hardison again. We are limited by the Energy Efficiency Block Grant guidelines to 20% of the total block grant amount going to private financing programs. So we'll have to look a little carefully. We have maxed that out right now, but there may be another way we can describe it and put it into a different category if funding does shift
Very
around.
good. Well, I appreciate that cooperation and that spirit there. It's very important to us. Just, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask for what is number 10, if I could have somebody on number 10 come up and explain the Cleantech Corridor Integrated Strategy, how it would work, and is this 500,000 the beginning of moving in that direction, and where do we see this potentially going?
Thanks, Councilman, for that question.
Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Sean Arian. I'm the Mayor's Director of Economic Development Strategy, and I'd like to introduce a colleague from the CRA, Jenna Gulager. She's a Special Assistant to the Deputy of Operations. Thanks again for that question. If you're familiar with the Cleantech Corridor, is an area that sort of straddles three council districts, Council Districts 1, 9, and 14, running along the LA River alongside downtown Los Angeles. What the idea is behind the Cleantech Corridor strategy is we've done a lot of the work on the economic development side. This is about marrying the sustainability and economic development piece for the corridor. We're hoping that this work, the strategy, this next step of the strategy will focus on 4 areas: on infrastructure, sustainability, developing the economic cluster analysis, and being able to coordinate all the plans. And just to give you a little idea about what we're thinking, for example, on infrastructure, right now we're thinking about what infrastructure needs are there that are missing, that we're going to need to fill in to attract businesses to this area. So we'll look at things like, why aren't companies coming to this area right now? It's a historic industrial core of Los Angeles, used to provide tons of jobs for South LA and East LA, not providing them as much today. And we'd like to make sure that it is an area that is able to do that. Why haven't companies been coming there? And even though that we're doing this it's called the Cleantech Corridor. We hope we're going to get a lot of companies in things like renewable energy and water sustainability in there. But this type of work is going to be good for all businesses and all companies that want to come into this area. We hope it'll help revitalize that area. I'm going to turn it over to Jenna to just talk a little bit about what the CRA strategy is in specific.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jenna Gulager with the Redevelopment Agency, and also to answer your question, the CRA is putting together a more focused, comprehensive strategy for the Cleantech Corridor. We've been working in several areas, looking at key real estate projects, looking at doing infrastructure planning, other land use planning, through our design for developments, and also looking at the sustainability issues in the area, and developing some specific programming for business attraction in the area. Where these funds are really helpful, and this kind of goes to Councilmember Perry's question earlier, is we really can only spend our funds in redevelopment project areas, but the Cleantech Corridor is more than a redevelopment project area. We have parts of the 1st, 14th, and 9th Council District. We have a few project areas, but a large portion is not. So these funds can actually augment some of the planning studies we already have queued up that we want to work on, and let us look at the whole corridor in a place where we're already doing this work and queued up to do this work. So I think it's a key marriage of some funding sources that we can bring to do a comprehensive strategy and bring green jobs to the corridor.
I mean, I'm excited to hear what you're saying, and this $500,000 will do in your opinion, the necessary research to go forward. And let's assume that your dreams come true. What would you all like to see happen in that corridor? How much development are you talking about, and over what period of time?
And if I can ask you just to be brief, because we are at 10 o'clock for the council meeting. Thank you.
Absolutely. Councilman, what we're thinking is right now, and to be very brief, LA has a lot of strengths that haven't been recognized. So I think we have the opportunity to really showcase Los Angeles as an international center for clean technology with our universities, workforce, et cetera. We haven't done a good job of it. If we do it well in the Cleantech Corridor, it'll attract international attention to Los Angeles, which will benefit not just the city, but the entire region. So you'll see, for example, a lot of large companies where we don't have space for them in the corridor anyway, we don't have large parcels there, will end up going to the harbor and the valley, for example. So we anticipate that it's going to be a huge economic boon for the city. We've heard preliminary figures just in terms of, President Obama says he sees 5 million new green jobs in the next 2 decades. How many of those Los Angeles will capture will be in large part dependent on projects like this.
Great. Well, thank you. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hahn.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question. I'm not really sure where it falls under in terms of the green work retrofitting program. One of the things I never hear us talk about, which I think is a key workforce development training job possibility, is deconstruction, environmental deconstruction. And that's, the idea of if there are areas where buildings need to get removed or torn down. I know there's 300 abandoned Navy houses in San Pedro that will one day be a housing project. But the idea of, not bulldozing like we used to in the old days, but it's step-by-step removing windows, doors, recycling, saving. And I know the Conservation Corps obviously is working, could pay young people at risk, $15 an hour to do this. Is that any part of what we're using any of this grant money for?
Currently, we have not used these particular dollars on the deconstruction. There really is a field of work around the environmentally safe demolition work that comes in, and restoration is how it fits in. We haven't engaged in that, but we have been engaged in the broader construction, which
I really would like us to engage in that.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it is at the basis of green living, is figuring out how we can employ people, pay them a decent wage, and environmentally remove buildings that, are scheduled or slated for demolition. I really think we're missing a huge piece of where I think we can employ people quickly. There's a workforce out there. Again, CCC is willing to do the training. I know of some shovel-ready projects right now that could benefit from that. And I really would like this to be a part of our whole green workforce.
No, that's great. We'll definitely follow up with Bruce at the Conservation Corps, as well as our friends in the building trade, to really get a handle around that particular aspect of the construction.
Good. I'd really like us to do that
we'll follow up
quickly. Again, I think it's a huge area that I think we should not ignore.
No, great idea.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just to briefly add, our department has worked with some programs in that regard, and I'd be happy to follow up with you and your staff about that.
There's such a nexus, not just environmentally removing buildings, but, when you can capture some of the material that can actually be reused, and then organizations like Habitat for Humanity are able to take those items, and they have those warehouses where people come and look for windows and doors, and it's really, it's now when I see things being demolished, I sort of cringe, thinking there is such a better way to do it. And again, I think it fits all of our criteria of employing people, doing something that certainly helps for our green, workforce initiatives, and then reusing a lot of these materials and helping organizations like Habitat for Humanity. It's just, deconstruction is, I think, really the next wave, and I really want us to be able to use some of these recovery funds in that respect. I'm telling you, there are projects right now that we could begin employing people. Okay. The other thing I was going to just ask about was the green, the port technology, number 11, advancement program, 1.7. And just wanted I don't know if anybody's here to explain how that ties into the Port Technology Center, which is a collaboration between the Port, the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce, the San Pedro Chamber of Commerce, and how does this tie into that initiative?
Tricia Carey with the Harbor Department. At this point in time, we're hoping to use these funds to get matching funds from the California Energy Commission to support electric truck commercialization and deployment at the port. You can certainly look into that, and we can provide a response to your office. But I know that the CEC is requiring matching funds. So at this point,
this says the Port Technology Advancement Program is a critical feeder component of the Green Port Technology Center, which was formed to attract green technology. So I'm just trying to figure out, how does this grant?
We could use the funding for agencies that want to apply for matching funds. The port will give them 50% to employ green technologies to reduce emissions at the port. That's the overall focus of it.
It said it's anticipated that this could create as many as 189 green jobs. So you're just kind of projecting that someone will apply for matching grants?
Let me add, the overall program certainly is more than the $1.75 million, and the overall program does speak to what you're speaking to, Councilmember, and this feeds into our ability to begin to leverage. There are CEC funding where we need to leverage some portion of a match that would then lead to about an $8 million funding from AB 118, which would then go into this this technology advancement program, which would then build for your connections. So this is one small piece that then will lead to the leverage of approximately about what we're seeing, close to $7 to $8 million, to then bridge the overall piece.
Can you just make this? Is there any future vision to just sort of grant this money straight to the Port Technology Center? Because it's my understanding that that's at the core of being the incubator to attract these innovative green technology type businesses who need a place to try out their stuff and get the support. It's an incubator. It's what we all know as an incubator. This sounds really kind of not going directly to the Port Technology Center, but
I think there is going to be an opportunity for resources to go directly into the Port Technology Center. Certainly,
because I think they're the ones that need the funding to really have a successful incubator.
Yes, I think we agree, and we'll certainly have the port look into how
I would like, if it's possible, a little more detailed.
For that specific
I'm not
port
really
technology.
thrilled with your answers on how this money is going to be used.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll provide that.
Okay. All right. With that, we will go ahead and move forward as amended, and with the reports back, the item number 2, without objection? Okay, so ordered. That concludes our meeting of the ad hoc committee. Thank you all. We will begin our city council meeting in just about a minute. We have a quorum already.